to understand those fine distinctions, and that's part of separating the wheat from the chaff.
Yeah, I think I hadn't made that connection before, actually, but you're right. And I would say this is important because agape love is what Dr. King said was the ultimate ideal that the civil rights movement aspired towards and wanted to embody. This was a part of the reason why when people would go out and protest segregation in diners, say, before they would go out to protest, they would actually ask themselves, am I harboring a spirit of resentment? Am I harboring a spirit of rage or vengefulness? And if I am, then I'm not going to go out to protest today, because I'll just end up projecting that onto the person that I'm protesting. And they ultimately believe that even while I am fundamentally and vehemently disagreeing with this action that these people are engaging in, this racist action, this dehumanizing action, I want to make sure that how I comport myself does not dehumanize you in turn. And even more to the point, the way I comport myself is informed by the spirit of agape love, which means seeing you as made in the image of the divine, even as you are engaging in this problematic behavior, which is a very difficult thing to do and to practice. It, like in live, when people are calling you racial slurs, or people are threatening you with lynchings, or people are actually in the process of lynching you. It is an incredibly difficult thing to practice and embody, but this attests to the strength of that movement. And I think there's so much more we can learn from that movement, and part of the theory of enchantment's goal is to sort of resurrect the spirit of that movement and bring it back into public discourse. And I think, because I think it has been lost to some extent.
Well, lost and just difficult in precisely the manner that you described, right? I mean, wouldn't it be lovely if we could comport ourselves in that manner? That the goal of your interactions with someone is to do what you can in all humility to call forth the best in them in every possible way. And I do believe that to some degree you do that with truth in speech. With careful attention to your words, and I've seen some of that. I would say, well, again, perhaps most particularly in the tours that I've done, talking to people about their attempts to improve themselves, and their desire for that element of, that's an element of the patriarchy in some sense, right? Is that invitation to mold yourself in a certain way, but that should be encapsulated within this overarching love. And what is that love? The love is, in a more abstract sense, the love is, I think that's a hard thing to manage because we're all so angry about the limited preconditions of our existence and our subjugation to tragedy and our subjugation to tyrannical authority built into the structure of existence, and then to rise above that with your best self and still to wish for the best to manifest itself instead of being angry and wanting revenge for that terrible suffering. But what's the alternative? Is to make the suffering worse, to make the tyranny worse? I mean, you can be attracted to that because you get so angry, and it's like, well, to hell with everything. And why? Well, because look at what's happened. Look how unjust this is. Look at how much suffering there's been. It's like, well, let everything burn, and especially those who perpetrated. But, well, we know where that ends up, and hopefully that isn't where we want to go. It's a universal problem, this idea of alienation, and part of the question is, how do you overcome that? And when you were talking about sympathy with universal suffering and appreciation for complexity and diversity, I had images of crucifixion in my imagination. Thought, well, part of the reason that image was a very strange image to be worshipped, to be regarded as sacred for so long, to be so central. It is an image of the universality of suffering and inexhaustibility. And so it's to see that crucified possibility in every individual. That's at the center of Christian ethos.
But also the capacity to transcend it.
Right, well, that's built into that story, and it requires a death and a rebirth, right? And you can think of that psychologically as well as ontologically. That's the religious question, is what does that mean in terms of the structure of reality? But we do redeem our crucified diversity and all the trouble that gets us into by a sequence of deaths and rebirths. That happens every time we're wrong, and we have to rebuild ourselves. And in any narrative of redemption, like the Exodus story, you see that as well. This escape from tyranny, this descent into chaos, and then reconfiguration. And so I thought in Maps of Meaning, I posited that identification with that process was redemptive rather than any of the states, right? That you are this thing that's on this journey of continual self-transcendence.
Yeah, it's the process itself, but the issue is that Cartesian duality, one of the issues is that Cartesian duality in its obsession with certainty and mathematical certainty has a problem with the unknown, an existential problem with the unknown, because it's fixated with certainty. And I know that in Maps of Meaning, you draw this connection to, I believe it was Milton's depiction of the adversary of Satan and how the evil being is not someone who represents the other, but someone who cannot handle the unknown and who is fixated on certainty and of an absolute sense. And in being fixated with certainty, claims to be God. Right? And I can see that trend within the Cartesian revolution, or the Cartesian element of the Enlightenment. In being obsessed with certainty, you deny your shadow. You deny all the parts of yourself that you do not like, and then you project that shadow onto the other, and then that causes so many complications, and that's putting it mildly, down the line.
How deep into the weeds, let's say, do you go in these seminars?
I mean, not this deep, not as deep as this conversation, but this is what my brain is often doing in between time.